Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. Today we have Bill Price, who is the founder of SportKid.
Hi, Tori.
What is your swimming story? Specifically, how did you get started? What are some of your highlights of your career? And where are you today?
Well, I got started at a local YMCA in Carbondale, Pennsylvania. I taught swimming there and I sort of swam on a team there. And it's a very small town. So since I taught swimming there, I became the local expert in swimming. And I didn't really get into an organized team until I got to college in 1973. And then I was a Division I school. It used to be called East Stroudsburg State College in Pennsylvania. It's now a university, but it's ESU now. But it was a state college back then. And I guess my real claim to fame in my swimming career is I one time qualified for the Division II Nationals in the 100 yards breaststroke. And then after that, I just went into the coaching right after that.
So where are you today? What has that done and translated to in terms of your career over the course of your life?
After college, for about 30 years, I was a swimming coach. I coached in clubs in Pennsylvania and Florida, Vermont, Illinois, and then in Malaysia, twice in Malaysia. I've been in coaching for a long time. I left coaching in 2008 and took a teaching job at the United States Sports Academy in Southern Alabama. For 5 years, I was there. And then in 2013, early 2014, I moved permanently to Malaysia. And I was teaching sports science courses for government ministries there for 4 years. And now that contract is over. I'm trying to get a business started, which is what SportKid Metrics is. It's a business in Southeast Asia. And I'm just getting that off the ground now. But things have been sort of set aside a little bit because of the pandemic. It's a worldwide thing. It's not just the United States. So I'm here in Pennsylvania in the United States right now, and I'm just waiting for the time when I can go back to Malaysia and get back to work.
How did your experience in swimming specifically impact your career, and why have you remained in the swimming and wider sports world since?
Well, I enjoyed swimming, obviously, when I was doing it. I still do it occasionally, not as much as I used to. I'm more into cycling now, and as I'm getting older, I'm also transitioning into walking. But I was always had my hand in not just the technical aspects of the sport, but rather the demographics and the sociology behind it, sort of what made people tick. I never coached in college. It was always in a club situation. So a lot of what I did dealt with what you read about a lot in online and in sport magazines and psychology magazines as youth sport. Most swimming coaches I know don't refer to what they do as youth sport. In fact, when I was a swimming coach, it used to sort of make me bristle when I heard somebody say, well, you're a youth sports coach. No, I'm a swimming coach. When you think about it, it really is youth sport when you look at it on a worldwide level, because we're working with youth. And I think that's what kept me involved with it. Even when I left coaching in 2008 and went to school, the United States Sports Academy teaches college level and above courses. So I was working with people in the bachelor's program. My interests were always with the youth sport and how, I guess you could say, how kids actually become elite level athletes. A lot of times in sports, we don't really think about, for example, Caleb Dressel comes from, how did he get his start? What was his first experience with the sport? Manuel, where did she get her start? And questions like that, I think, are important because in the sport, when we look at things like what's going on now with the Olympic trials, we see the best athletes that we have in our country. We don't really see the 400,000 other athletes that are also involved in our sport. Which ones of those in the years to come are going to be replacing our Olympic stars of today? And more importantly, how are they going to do that? That's the thing I'm most interested in right now. And that's really, it's an academic pursuit more than a technical one, but that's what keeps me involved with it right now.
Well, it's a great question to ask. Just wondering what the longevity of a swimmer is, or any kind of athlete. How young are they when they start? How young are they, and how much work does it take to get to be an Olympian?
Right.
And when does that start, and how much does it, involve? Those are great questions to ask. And so let's talk a little bit about SportKid, because we've mentioned that a couple times now. So what does it do and what is the science behind it?
The SportKid started out being a simple membership and registration database for athletes. So a national governing body could register every athlete in the country with an online system. And cooking up something like that is easy enough, but getting people interested in using it, that's another story altogether. If you've never used anything like that, sometimes you don't really see the need for it. So the hardest part really about getting the company off the ground was convincing people that they actually needed to use something like that, so that they had an idea, not just who their elite level athletes were, but rather how many athletes they had in the pipeline, so to speak, how many athletes you have in the country, where are the clubs, who are your coaches, what's their level of training, just basic demographic data. How old are the kids? Are they boys or girls? Where do they live in the country? A lot of those countries in Southeast Asia, if you get away from China or India, a lot of them are small enough where you're dealing with enough data that makes it manageable for people that really aren't used to managing that kind of data. So that's where it started at first. And then we added some additional coding to the membership and registration database, where we could do some simple measurements on the athletes, or that they could do them in their home clubs or their coaches or whoever they could get to do the measurements in terms of height, weight, arm span, leg length. And there might be another one in there too, I can't remember. And you get those 4 or 5 measurements and you do those on a regular basis. We recommend every 4 or 5 months. And you're able to calculate what's called a maturity offset. So you'll be able to figure out when these children are going to reach what in the United States we call the teenage growth spurt or the adolescent growth spurt. And in the technical lingo, they call it peak height velocity. But with the maturity offset, you're able to figure out what their age is going to be when they reach their peak height velocity. For coaches in many sports, knowing when athletes are going to reach that period is an important training milestone. So if they knew when that was coming up, then they'd be able to adjust training appropriately and take advantage of some of the training windows that open up during that growth period. And the thing about peak height velocity is that a lot of people will tell you, well, when my son or my daughter reached their adolescent growth spurt, I could see it, because I had to buy bigger shoes, I had to buy longer pants, the whole story. But a lot of that growth occurs before it's visible. And that's one of the benefits of having something like a formula or an online tool that will help you figure out when that happens. There's some other tools in there also, like arm span. You can figure out arm span height ratios. Obviously, you have BMI. And there's some other things there that will predict adult height. These are the things that if you take a child to a doctor, they'll put them through all these measurements and they'll be able to tell you, yes, your son or daughter will be this tall. Your son or daughter, is in this percentage in terms of height or weight, all kinds of things like that. None of these measurements are invasive, so they're easy to do. So we can do simple videos, so coaches can do these measurements every 4 months, and then you get a good picture of how their athletes are growing, when certain groups of athletes are going to reach milestones, et cetera, things like that.
So when would you recommend that coaches and anybody who uses SportKid, how young do you want them to actually start working with the kids using it?
Well, you can use the SportKid measurements for any age athlete, really. I mean, if you have children in a training program, then you can use the measurements starting as young as you want. The measurements become more accurate as the child gets closer and closer to their growth spurt, the beginning of the growth spurt. So even though you do a measurement on, say, an 8 or a 9-year-old in swimming, for example, that's going to give you a number. But if you do that measurement again when they're 10, you might get a slightly different number. And then at 11, you'll get a slightly different number from that one. But the whole point of the people that came up with these formulas will tell you that the closer they are to the actual age at their peak height velocity, the more accurate the formulas become. You would do a series of measurements. You wouldn't just measure them once when they're 9 and say, well, when they're 14 and a half years old, they're going to reach this growth spurt. It's going to be around there, but it's not that accurate unless you keep on doing it every several months.
So, for coaches especially, what is the best part about SportKid, and what is the most valuable aspect of the tool itself?
The most valuable aspect is that it has all of your data in one spot about your club. You have all the athletes, their ages, all their registration numbers that you need. It's the same kind of thing that, well, in the United States, we have USA Swimming that has all that data available to coaches and clubs. This is a different system. The US system obviously is proprietary to US Swimming, so it's not going to be used in other countries. So that's pretty much what got this idea started with SportKid. It was not just USA Swimming, but other national governing bodies in the United States have these registration systems where you actually do keep track of the demographics of your sport. Coaches would have all the data for their athlete, everybody in their club. They'd be able to register new athletes, get lists, for keeping attendance at training and all kinds of things like that. And then the national governing body would also be able to enter performance data, competition data, much in the same way that if you use a team manager or a meet manager program nowadays in the United States, you'd be able to take that data and just load it up into a database, which would not only offer the results of competitions online to parents, coaches, and athletes, but also to the public. If you look for information about sport results in some other countries, you're going to find that it's ridiculously hard to find information about what the results for a competition are, unless they're in the FINA database, which if you look through the FINA database, you'll find that they only have like world championship level kind of stuff. It's not like your Halloween classic in the club down the street. That kind of stuff doesn't get into that database. But this would have performance data. SportKid would have performance data for all of the competitions within the country that anybody, parents, grandmothers, the press would be able to access and find out information about how athletes did in a particular competition.
So, one thing that I know you were able to do is sit down and take a little bit of a tour through our FM Fast Track set of tools. That is our set of tools that we've built specifically for swim athletes, but we are planning on branching out. We have our MindWorks program as well as our strength program. And I just wanted to get a sense of your thoughts on the FM Fast Track itself, and then in your experience, especially when it comes to the training, what is the most important aspect of swim training or any kind of sport training for any kind of athlete? Mental, technique, strength, energy systems, or something else?
Well, when Nick went through the list of all the tools that you guys offer online, and he showed me what each one of them was. Most of the stuff that SportKid would deal with would be mainly through either the mind or technical aspects of it. We don't deal with just swimming. It's just a general administrative tool that any national governing body can use, actually. But it would mainly be mind, because it would offer the national governing body a pretty good idea of what the demographics of their sport look like. A lot of the things that they could do would be keep track of retention in their sport. Because when it comes to, if you're asking me, I mean, as a swim coach, I probably could come up with a couple of different training-wise things that I think are important. But from a viewpoint of what's the most important thing in terms of sport development, what gets a kid, say like a 9-year-old kid in swimming, what gets them to the level where they might toy with the idea of becoming the next Caleb Dressel or someone like that. And that is keeping them around long enough to make a difference. If you get 9-year-olds and they're in an experience that they just don't like, then after their first year, they're going to be off playing soccer or, taking piano lessons or something else, anything but swimming. So the goal a lot of times for clubs and coaches, I think, and this is mainly a national governing body goal also, because as clubs go, so does the national governing body. So if your clubs are successful, then the national governing body will be successful. And you got to get kids into your activity, and you have to figure out some way to keep them there. Because at 9, 10, and 11, they have no investment in the sport at all. They don't care. As a coach, I would always have, our team would have sign up days or tryout days, however you wanted to call it. People would come in and they would say that, this 10-year-old boy who's overweight shows up in his baggy, basketball pants to show up for swim tryouts. I would always be told, oh, he loves swimming in his grandmother's pool. His grandmother has a backyard pool. And in my mind, I know that this 10-year-old boy and our idea of fun is not exactly the same. His idea of fun is cannonballing all afternoon into his pool. My idea of what he should be doing in the pool is a little bit different. To keep him involved, and as a coach, a longtime coach, I've seen this happen so many times. That kind of athlete that shows up, and you've seen, are you a swimmer by yourself, by the way?
Yes, I am.
Their pants are down to their knees. And, they just don't know what they're doing. But 5, 6 years from then, they're in the region championships. They might be qualifying for nationals. And the secret to that was the coach or the clubs that kept them interested in the sport long enough for them to get there. Because it's easy to get a 9-year-old into your program, and it's just as easy to lose a 9-year-old. The trick is hang on to them until they're 10. Hang on to them while they're 11, and then they learn, they become invested in the sport, they get good at it, and all of a sudden, it's less about what the coach does to keep them involved and more about what they want to do to stay involved. And once you get to that point, you've already won. Then all the technical training that the coaches go through, that's when that makes a difference. But until that point, you don't really have to know too much about the technique involved with swimming when you're a 9-year-old. You have to figure out, if you're a 9-year-old coach, you have to figure out some way to keep these people happy and involved. Because if they're not involved, it doesn't matter how much you know. They're not there. Who cares how much technical things you know? Once they're invested, though, you got them.
The emotional connection is
yes,
of massive importance. And that is something that we actually teach in our MindWorks program. We have several topics inside of it. Focus, talking all about how to really dial into what we're doing.
Mhm.
Emotion, talking about how to make our feelings work for us and channel the energy that we get from our emotions. And then finally, progress, how to actually understand development and how to learn and how to move forward. And we found that students who go through this program, and not just swimmers, but anybody would be able to take that program. And that goes back to what you were saying about the global connection and being able to do it with all youth athletes. Is it really allows them to understand themselves and engage with and be enthusiastic about the things that they are enthusiastic about, really get the most out of it. So I definitely agree. Getting any young person to be engaged in the sport that they're in, whether it's swimming or something else, is really going to be the thing that produces longevity, because anybody can do something. Any swimmer can swim thousands of yards, but if they're not enjoying it, they may not come back tomorrow. And
exactly. If they come back tomorrow, you've made progress.
Yep, there's always tomorrow. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk to me today. Is there any last message you want to leave to our younger community members, especially that are coming up today?
Well, I just like what I just said a few minutes ago. If you could just stay, if you're a young athlete that's involved with the sport now, listen to the coaches, try to get something that you can attach to every day that make something that you hear in the pool or that you do in the pool and make it your own. When I was coaching, we'd have kids that would take pride in how fast they could do a turn. Some of the people would be like cannonballs coming off the blocks. I mean, they had some of the best starts that you'd see in the pool, and that was their thing. So find something that you really enjoy doing and make it your own. Become the expert on your team in something that you're good at.
Great words to follow. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Tori. Bye-bye.